Director of Sport, Episode 2. I discussed the transition from senior school to whole school Director of Sport with Evan Stewart. I really hope you find this interesting if you're watching or listening, and don't forget to subscribe. Any comments, feedback, welcome. I really hope you enjoy the episode, and thanks for listening. So Evan, thank you for joining. I hope you've had a chance to look at the questions. Let's crack on. What does your current role look like at the moment, and what does the department look like? What's the management of people, schools? I'm really intrigued to hear.
Yeah, thanks, James. Thanks for having me on. Listened to episode 1 and really enjoyed it. It was really refreshing to hear that sort of first story and first bit of research, and lots of similarities to things I've gone through. So I'm currently Director of Sport, Health and Fitness at Bishop Stortford College, and that's across the whole college. So that's 3 schools from 4 to 18, and that's our pre-prep, our prep, and our senior school. So it's a fairly wide-ranging role. Within that, that's both the physical education and the traditional games program, but we're also trying to bring in the health and fitness. I don't want my role to have a job title that has health and fitness in it, but we never really touch on that properly. So it's about developing that, and that goes budget, marketing, SMT meetings. So yeah, pretty wide ranging. Department of 26 to 28 sort of full-time staff that are sort of sports specific, and then we have support from the academic staff as well on the games program. That does come mainly in the prep school rather than in the senior school, but we do have some in the senior school.
Wow, big department.
Yeah, it is really big, but very ably assisted by 2 assistant directors of sport. So that was something I talked to SMT about very early on. So I got the job at the Christmas before starting in September. So I had a really good run into it, met with SMT and the 3 heads sort of fortnightly on that run up to it, which I thought was really, really good. But it allowed me to put in some things like 2 assistant directors of sport, split that role up. It had traditionally been 1. So we split it. So we've got a pre-prep and prep school, assistant director of sport, and then a senior school, assistant director of sport, who's also second in department. So it really helps have that sort of 3 of us to split a role. They deal with a lot of the day-to-day things. I'm looking bigger picture, but very much involving them and trying to stay as involved in the day-to-day as I can.
So then how did you sell that to SMT in terms of trying to get, essentially an additional leadership position within the department, or was that from your fortnightly conversations, and I suppose who led those as well?
Yeah, so again, it's something I learned from my first role where I was at Portsmouth Grammar School, was regular contact with SMT, and I had it at Portsmouth, but nowhere near the extent that I have it now. So it was a lesson I learned really early on, and it was something certainly that came up, I know, in episode 1. Being able to manage up and being able to have those regular dialogues was absolutely key. I was very lucky that when taking the job, the head, so the head of the whole college, she was very, very honest in our very first meeting, and she said, this will not work unless you and I are honest from word go, and we stick to that. And that was a breath of fresh air. And we were right from the start. I said, you've got a department that is this big. If you want it to run properly, this is what I think we need to do. And everything so far that I've asked to do, she has backed it, and as has the whole of SMT.
No, that's brilliant. That's brilliant, and that kind of falls on from the research and the data from essentially, and the conversations that I know Seb had with lots of directors of sports around, having that SLT support, and I think that's really important to have that. So that kind of leads on to the second question about your previous school, and how your experience and knowledge you gained in that position prepared you for this role, a much bigger role in that sense, in terms of where you're at now. So what did you really take away from that?
I think the first thing for me was, again, leaving my previous role, was asking people what, in that first year I was there, what did I do that you liked? What did I do that maybe you thought I could have done quicker? And a big thing was having a clear vision. But again, I had a bigger run up into this job I'd had the experience at a school previous to coming here doing a similar role, but as you say, just in the senior end of the school. But getting that clear vision, getting it almost agreed before I got there, we managed to put 4 key principles or 4 pillars in place that were agreed by governors, that was the direction we wanted to go in. So I felt like I was really coming in and knowing what governors and SMT wanted and aligned with what I wanted. So again, it goes back to that episode 1 where you do due diligence on the school you're going to, and is that a school I could work in? Have they been honest with me? Is what their head here wants something I want to really buy into? Because there's no point in me agreeing at interview, but sitting, having accepted the job, thinking actually I want to go a completely different direction, because you're already kind of causing friction you don't need to cause.
Yeah, that's certainly important. That due diligence. I went through a couple of interviews for director of sport, and sat in a few where actually you're being grilled about how you're going to get to the end product and given the answer of, well, this is what you need to do, and actually it wasn't quite aligning to what the head wanted. That was very difficult. Safe to say that I turned that one down.
Yeah.
Moving to a large school, then it does bring its complexities, and it's one of the things that I've thought about in terms of all you're doing is scaling, the issues you may come across, or the complex issues really, going from a kind of a medium, not saying that Portsmouth Grammar is a medium-sized school, but in terms of management structure, to then where you are now. But what have been some of the toughest adjustments, I suppose, you've made, or you've had to make in this new environment?
Yeah, I think first thing to say is having that remit over the whole school has been a real breath of fresh air, because you can make decisions that can affect the whole of the college and all 3 schools. But it was learning quickly, and more importantly, building and earning the trust of other key stakeholders. So those 2 assistant directors of sport, it was absolutely vital that they agreed with the vision I was trying to build, and SMT wanted me to build, because I was going to have to hand that over to them, and I'm starting to hand more and more of that over to them on a day-to-day basis. So if I didn't do that, it wouldn't function. I couldn't keep all 3 schools, everything that's going on in my head absolutely all the time, without those guys being able to pick up some of that stuff, and they do it brilliantly, but equally making sure that they get to feed into where we're going. And it's not just, this is what I want you to do, go and deliver it. It's, what do you think of this? And I suppose having the belief in the things you think are really important and them not being negotiable, but also being willing to listen to opinions of others and take it on board, because sometimes you can get lost in, I think this is a really great idea because I'm coming at it from my view, but actually 2 or 3 other people can give you absolutely vital information or opinion that you just haven't thought about, because you haven't come from that side of it. You've got some people here that have been here for 15, 20 years. You've also got some people that came in about the same time as me. So making sure I got lots of opinions, but didn't water down what I wanted to do, I think was really important.
How do you kind of, I suppose, kind of slightly a bit of a side note, how do you respectfully acknowledge those ideas, but almost decline them in a way that isn't disrespectful?
Yeah, I think, again, that comes down to very early on gaining and earning the respect and trust of the department. So I have this year spent way more time than I probably would have or would going forward in the department, physically in the office. So our office is, this is sort of the 20, 25 guys in the office, and I'm in a separate office to them, but I've spent most of my time either working in there or just being in there. So I'm there when they come in the morning, I'm there at lunch, having conversations and gaining people's trust, hopefully, and then realizing he's here because he wants to be here, he's here to listen to us. And then if they want to have a more private conversation, coming into what is my own office. And if I don't like something, again, something I've learned is be honest quite early on. So I probably had more difficult conversations this year in my first year than I did at Portsmouth. If I saw something I didn't like, I addressed it quicker rather than observing and staying away from it thinking, oh, well, I'll fix that next year. I actually said, no, let's fix it now.
That's really interesting. Well, I'm sure people would like to delve into those difficult conversations, but I'm also aware that that they are difficult and no one wants to have them, and they're private as well. But well done, because I suppose, and not in a patronising way, because they are difficult. Because I suppose it comes back down to what you want to try and achieve within the department to get the best outcomes for the students, and then that's why we need to have them. In a bigger school, then you're running potentially either more sport or just the sheer number of kids that you have. How do you kind of go about managing your time effectively to make sure everyone does get your attention? Because I feel you've got 26 in your department, you've got 2 assistant directors of sports, we've got 12, 13 in the department I'm in, and I want to try and touch base with them regularly, but I know sometimes I let that slip, and that's really difficult. That's certainly a reflection of mine from this year, having to be a little bit more on the ground to some extent, just from a teaching timetable perspective, and sometimes that those one-to-ones can be neglected. So I'm just curious to know really how you make sure you do give adequate attention to everyone.
Yeah, look, I won't sit here and say that I get that perfect. I think I'm the same as you. There are times, there are end of weeks where you think, oh, I actually probably haven't had more than a cursory hello when a conversation with someone. But I think it's guys knowing that my door, while it might not be physically open, is open at any point, and I continue to make that point, is I would rather stop what I'm doing and have a conversation there and then than send them away. And then I think what they've learned is if I say I can't have it right now, they know it's genuinely because I'm busy and not because I don't want to have it, and then they will come back. So early on, I very much sort of got that out there to people that my door is open, come talk to me, I will stop what I'm doing, because I want to hear what you want to say, or what you've got to say. And then again, it's being around and being visible. I'm quite lucky in that my timetable is relatively light. So again, back to your episode 1, effectively myself and the other directors of sport set our timetable. With SMT very much aware of it, I teach the least of anyone, and then we trickle it down, as is in most departments. So I do have more time than probably most. I would still say I would want more. I think that you talk to every director of sport and give me time and I can make things good, give me more time and I can make them even better. But yeah, really lucky in that respect. And again, just social conversations, we're quite an active department, so we do things together. I'm not saying you talk about work all the time, but then being able to sort of get to know you away from work and getting to know about your family, getting to know about their families, I think is a really important thing. So you can have those more private conversations or those more personal conversations, and they know you really care about them as a person and not about them as the head of rugby or them as the PE teacher, them as the grad. You actually care about how their holiday was, and not that cursory, hi, how was your holiday? Oh yeah, I remember you went to so and so, and did you see your family? Oh, you said you were going to see that uncle you haven't seen for a long time. And having that personal touch, and that's not easy. You've got to really focus. And one of the guys in the department laughs because I can have 3 or 4 different conversations at the same time, and he's like, it's just not something I can do. But I can see your eyes constantly moving, your ears are open, and you can step in and chat to people. And that's just something I think you learn. Again, it came back to that episode 1. You could have 4 different conversations walking down a corridor. Yeah,
and then that will be with so many different stakeholders as well, from a pupil to someone in the department and someone outside the department. If you've been fortunate enough to be door stopped by a parent, those conversations are always fun to have as well. In your current school, how, I suppose, are you allocating your resources to to your programs? Because I'd imagine it's quite a similar setup of potentially rugby, hockey, netball, hockey, cricket, athletics, but then you have the other element, kind of maybe higher up the school, where actually not everyone wants to engage in those sports. So do you have almost similar amount of resources there to allocate to those students that don't want to take part in team sports, or actually just see their timetabled PE or games lesson, predominantly games lesson, just as that time to be active? How do you go about that, I suppose?
So we, again, one of the very first things I was asked about at interview, and it was made very clear, is we didn't feel we offered enough to those people that don't, I say fit into, you shouldn't have to fit into, but don't necessarily jump straight into that chance to play team sports. What was on offer wasn't bad by any stretch, but it could be better. And like you say, was it equitable to what a team sport was getting? So early on, observing that first term, kind of let what had gone out in the summer term when I wasn't officially in charge happen, but made changes as we went. So we opened the gym a lot more to all our pupils. It had traditionally been quite for the scholars, the rugby, the hockey, etc. We now have at least 2 sessions a day that are completely open to everyone from our warm up, and we're also looking at how we can bring in more body movement stuff for those younger, so they're coming into the gym but not coming in and thinking, right, the first thing I want to do is try and lift that heaviest weight or jump on that piece of machinery because it looks cool. It's actually come in and learn. So I don't think we've cracked it by any stretch. I think our gym's heavily oversubscribed, and it's a good gym, but we can get sort of 25, 30 in there. On a senior games afternoon where we have close to 400 kids, 120 of those might want to be in there. So splitting up our time. So we've got 3 slots in there. Again, key messages SMT about how important it is. So we've gone a bit into a lunchtime to make one of those sessions work.
Okay.
A little bit after school. And we rotate those groups, so you're not always on the graveyard shift, as it were. Not always on the lunchtime one, where you don't miss lunch, but you have to be quite organised. So we rotate those on either a half term or a 4 weekly basis, depending on how that is, and cleverly sort of putting borders in slots which actually make sense for them and things like that.
Interesting. It's really interesting to hear how, and I'm sure across the country, senior games is the bane of every director of sports life, from a registration process to suitable activities to, what do you do in and around, those that forget their kit, their sixth formers, their year 11s, it's each school's so different, but the senior games, unless you have an abundance of resources, I suppose, it's always a challenge.
And where do you stop? You could offer 30 different options, and you want every one of those to be awesome, but you're 1, 2, or 3 sets of eyes, and you also want to be out in senior games making a difference. So for myself, in that first term, I wanted to be on senior rugby, and ended up actually on senior rugby, as in helping take the first team. It's not something I'm doing next year, but the way things had worked, that's where I ended up, which meant if I came away from that to observe other things, I felt like I was letting down that group I was working with. And I suppose having that realization that you're probably not letting them down because they've got some really good coaches still there. You're actually helping those other groups by checking in, and you're not necessarily, walking in and checking up on people. You're gauging pupils as they come out the gym. Was that a good session? What did you do? Was it all your own free time? Was there a session on the board you could follow? Did you feel like you could get advice?
It's quality control, isn't it? And part of it as well is that I spoke about this previously, is that actually, as practitioners, as teachers, kind of at the core of what we do, we still want to be involved, but actually stepping back and either going in to help or support is kind of, is quite difficult, because we feel like, yeah, as you said, we're letting either like people down because we're not there, but actually our role is to actually go and oversee and just make sure, you know, everyone is getting a good experience and a positive experience. Yeah, I've definitely experienced that as well. And, you know, it's one of those things where you enjoy doing it, but you know, you've got to do those other things as well.
And I think on the flip side of that, the other thing we did quite early on, it was run Christmas, 2 weeks before Christmas and 2 weeks after Christmas. I asked everyone to go and observe someone else, but
Nice.
also very much come and see me. Don't be afraid to say, "Oh, can I come and watch your rugby session if you're a hockey coach?" And I think straight away they went, "Oh well, if we can go and watch him." Not that I had anything to hide, or they have anything to hide, or you're checking up on each other. But it felt a lot more like if you dropped into a session, it didn't suddenly become like a lesson observation. It just became we're helping each other out, and I wasn't coming away from it writing any notes or being critical, but it just gave me a flavour of this is where we're at, this is where I'd like us to get to. Some lessons you walk into and you know yourself, not every lesson can be perfect. You want them to be, but they can't be, and you're probably your own harshest critic. So those people will come out and the first thing they'd come and say to you is, "Oh, I didn't like how this went or that went." Like, that's fine. I didn't come in to do that. I came in to look more at pupil engagement than actually what was happening initially. Because if they're not engaged, it doesn't matter what you're doing. So.
Yeah. If the task isn't set up right, then yeah, you could be best practitioner, but they're not engaged in it. And yeah, I think we've got to come from a point where we have to presume everyone can teach, and everyone, you know, teachers are good teachers, and actually, you know, what I think we've done quite well as a whole school was actually come at it from, right, that person coming into your lesson, what do you want them to focus on? So, you know, I found that really refreshing, rather than it being, I'm coming in to watch and I'm looking for this and this. Actually, it's been flipped quite nicely onto the staff member to go, these are 3 things I want you to look at, give me some feedback, and that's worked really well. That was a whole school thing. It kind of moves into my next question, really, in terms of, you know, how have you implemented positive changes or yeah, positive changes or just general improvements in the department in year 1, or has that been a bit of a slow burner, or has there been some easy wins that maybe you think, you know, is could be applicable to most directors of sport, or those thinking to be, or is it very content or context specific?
I think in many ways it's specific to your location, to your environment, but at the same time, early wins, you know, for us, early wins were we upped the number of people in the gym. I can't even say by how many, sort of 100%, because we just opened up that access, and straight away with the pupils and parents and other academic staff, they went, wow, that's amazing. Our pupils can now, you know, our sixth form can now come in if they've got a study period, but they have to allocate it and actually say they're coming, sign in, sign out, so that it's not just I'm in the gym and then they're telling us that they're in study period.
Yeah.
But those kids that really wanted to buy into that did it. I think early on I had parent forums, so I invited parents in. I sent them a quick feedback and said, if you can make it into the actual physical conversation, brilliant, but if not, write down your thoughts. And I kind of put my tin hat on. I was very honest and said, look, I've been here a term. It wasn't even, it was about 10, 11 weeks. So I had a couple before Christmas and a couple after. And I just said, unless you tell me what you're seeing as parents, I can't act on it. I can't change it. And look, there was some pretty honest parents as you get, and that was good in many ways. But again, supported by the fact that the senior deputy was there and another assistant head was there, and he took notes for me. So I was able to really focus and give my time to those parents, and I didn't have my head down writing down what they were saying. And that came back really positively in the end, because lots of parents said, thank you for doing this. I've had 3 kids go through this school, and this is the first time I felt like I have had a chance to really voice it, and someone wants to try and make things, improve things and make things better. The difficulty now is obviously doing that. And,
you're kind of held slightly accountable there to some extent. But, you know, I've certainly noticed that speaking to other directors of sports, and actually having these conversations with parents and parent forums, you know, it's striking a balance, because some parents want to come in and share what they feel we could do better, absolutely. But you've also got to make it worthwhile for that, worthwhile for them to come in as well. So that balance, I think, if people are thinking about running parent forums, they've got to think about that in terms of, when is it going to be, how often, brave, but actually at the end of the day, we're all on the same team, and I think that's important. And I think it's quite easy to put your head in the sand or avoid those conversations. But actually, what it does is kind of moves on to a little bit the next question about fostering those strong relationships. And I speak about here with coaches, athletes, and other staff members in a large school, but parents, that seems to be one thing that's really worked well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would say if you're thinking of doing that, there are a couple of companies out there that I think really specifically help you with that. So you've got Non-Perfect Dad, and he's very good with those conversations with parents. I would also probably seek some advice, speak to other directors of sport. I think, again, people have said it before, but since the pandemic, so many more people are willing to give you some time and chat through, this is how I did it, this is how I feel doing it. I remember I had one at Portsmouth in my second year, and it was too late, and it was not a very nice experience, and I left that, and it really knocked me for quite a long time. So I learned from that mistake. I spoke to more people. I made sure that parents were going away feeling as if they'd learned something and had the opportunity to speak to me, and not one or the other. And it wasn't just a fact-finding mission for me, it was also for them to find out a bit about me and what I had already seen and where I hoped we could get to. But yeah, it very much was conversations with other people as well before jumping in and getting on with it.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Just that, again, striking that balance, on the year 2 done, and actually still trying to continue to build relationships with parents, because half of it, as we know, just comes down to time. Got to make it worthwhile for them to come in. When do you speak to them? That's Non-Perfect Dad, Richard Shorter, he's been fantastic. So yeah, I'll certainly give him a big shout out, because he's certainly been brilliant with parents and engaging them. Any kind of unforeseen challenges or opportunities really that have come around from starting, I'd be interested to hear what has been potentially a challenge, either like on a professional level for you, from going from Portsmouth Grammar to Bishop Stortford, or what have been the opportunities from moving from one to the other.
Yeah, so a big one, and again, it wasn't necessarily unforeseen, but we've decided to change our timetable. So we're going from a 6-day school to a 5-day plus Saturday sport. So yes, a challenge, but also a really good opportunity. I think if we frame it the right way and we get the culture right, I think it will have a real positive, because we can move fixtures to mornings, we can engage more pupils, potentially, again, looking at that health and fitness. Is there an area that we can actually offer something that isn't the traditional competitive sport? We go and play a block fixture. Is there something we could do around park runs? Is there something we could do around opening our facilities up?
Yeah.
That would normally we wouldn't be able to do it because there are academic lessons on. And actually the changing that timetable in terms of just generally, we're now going from sort of 8:30 to 5 every day, and then after school practices after that. Again, really exciting, because we've managed to put some new things in, like pre-season sessions the whole way through a term for certain sports. So
that's good.
This term, our boys hockey and girls netball will have some pre-season sessions right the way down to year 7. And again, we're not trying to be, we're not looking purely at performance. That is open to everyone in that year group. And if we have to run 2 strands within that, and a bit more of a performance strand and a bit more of a participation strand, that's exactly what we'll do. But it wasn't just another excuse to bring the same A and B kids in. This is open to everyone. Come and try and enjoy getting ready for next term.
That's interesting. I think the balance of, and I think maybe there is scope here on those Saturday mornings. Did it really well at previous school where we ran tennis on a Saturday morning. It didn't matter if you were in the tennis squad or not. boys wanted to turn up, in certain year groups and learn a bit more and have a bit more access to that. And, I think that comes down to staffing and resources. We were fortunate to have that at my previous school, but actually there was that eagerness for those boys to be involved and just feel part of the community. And I think, the more of those things you can do as well, the park runs, they're fantastic, and there's an opportunity to bring in parents, right? There's the
Yeah.
opportunity to, actually make it a whole community, the health and fitness from your side of it. I think that all just comes down to staffing, doesn't it? And that comes back to the other point as well, support from above. That is really where I think schools who are pushing their sports programs and games programs, they have fantastic support, and people want to buy into it. How, I suppose, from previous school to current school, did your leadership change, or your style? It may not have. I suppose it's not it did change or it didn't, but did you have to adapt, or just did experience just teach you how to go about things differently?
Yeah, I think that was it. It's experience. You'll know yourself. If you, or when you do move on to your next role, you'll think back and think, right, in those first few weeks, months, term, year, what did I do? What did I feel I did well? What can I improve on? I think I'm probably more willing to listen, but less willing, as I said earlier, to possibly bend on the things I really believe in, and being really clear on those.
And what are they? I'm quite intrigued to know, like, what are some of the things that you just like, no, this is a non-negotiable for me?
So it really is that the pupils that leave us and actually enjoy, and I'll use the term sport. It doesn't have to be sport. Physically moving their bodies, and genuinely know why that's good. And I say it to lots of parents. I don't care if a pupil come back and tells me that I left and I go to the gym 3 times a week, or I left and I play in the 5th team hockey, or I left and I'm a 50 cap England international at whatever sport. Those are all wins, and getting parents, pupils, academics all to see those as wins, and not just who can we get a framed shirt from, or who can we put up in our sports hall, as that is the best thing we've ever done. Actually, should we have some pictures of 25, 30-year-olds up saying, I went to Bishop Stortford and I learned to move my body. I now go to Pilates twice a week, spin once a week, and I know the importance of moving, and I feel it's benefits in my professional life, my personal life. All of that is a win. And I think I wouldn't say that's where I was when I was first getting into teaching. I was coming from a sort of semi-professional sports direction, and definitely felt team sport and winning and that traditional, I want 10 boys. I was at an all boys school. I want 10 boys pictures up and they've all played for north of England or whatever. Whereas now I genuinely enjoy pupils coming up to me and telling me about what they've done. That, it doesn't have to be that international level sport.
Is that the role then of the directors of individual sports then? Are they looking to try and push those agendas? Because I say to the members of staff, in my department, that I have to be a bastion of all sports, and I have to say that to parents and pupils, that I can't, while I have my preferences, I actually have to try and support all of them. And actually, we do want all of our kids to be engaged, but actually that's what individual directors of those sports are really good at. They're really good at really pushing that top end and engaging those students that aren't there yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And something I've done for September, again with the backing of SMT, is we've brought in a sports administrator to take some of that admin heavy work away from heads of sport and directors of sport, to say, actually go and make your sport better. You shouldn't be spending this amount of time booking buses for match tees. And while those are hugely important to the programme, how are they helping these pupils get better? Whereas actually more time to plan sessions, have conversations like I want them to have, that I would have with them about, how is it going? Talk to your under 15A and B team coach, talk to your under 15 D and E team coach, who probably had never had a chance to speak to the head of rugby properly, or to the director of sport, or go and say, look, I'm going to take your session today. What do you want me to work on? And then they can watch and observe, and probably free people up from the desk a little bit more, so they're not thinking, oh, well, I have to stay here because I've got to get this bus booked and this sorted and speak to this other person. And I don't think we'll get it perfect straight away, because some people won't want to give that up because it's theirs and they've built it. But as soon as I think we get people realizing how much more time they have to really improve their program, I think we'll see people really buy into, how can I make my sport better?
Yeah, I think that's and did you go? How did you go about that question? Did you ask the individual heads of sports, what are some of the things that are taking up your time, and collated that to pass that on to SMT? Because I think it's all these little things where being a director of sport is kind of, people are like, what do you do? And there isn't, maybe a tangible outcome, whether or not that's winning trophies or tournaments, but that's not really, I suppose the job or the facilitator of others. Is that, how did you go about that conversation? Because I think that's the detail I think is really important for people in the role or thinking about going in the role, and have some context to it.
Yeah, so again, having been a head of sport, knowing where it was, and it was quite a while ago, but not a lot. If anything, it's probably got worse in terms of admin.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, just again, being in and amongst it, and not sitting in my office thinking, well, it must all be fine because I haven't had a parental email, or I haven't had someone come and knock on my door, and actually seeing what they had to do, and sometimes buying in, going, let me help you, let me see it, because I need to know it and I need to understand it. And again, going to SMT and saying, look, by allowing us to bring this person in, who's also going to do some coaching in the afternoon, it's actually someone who many years ago was the head of sport here at the school, is a maths teacher, but is looking to sort of retire. But why would we let all that experience go? So he's going to come into the department, but giving them some real detail about what his role could be. Again, I had someone at Portsmouth that did that role, so I was able to use that job description and go to them and say, look, if we took all of this away, here are some of the things I think our heads of sport could go away and work on. And it was a bit of a penny drop moment of, actually, we're employing a head of hockey or a head of netball to sit at a spreadsheet, putting in time, leave times, return times.
Yeah, and I know schools, feel like they want to get bang for their buck from people, especially, teachers, in the profession. We're professionals, and we're expensive, and rightly so. Then you do an undergrad and then postgrad to get to not be paid what we're worth. But on the flip side, I know a lot of schools kind of are looking for that teacher of PE and head of sport. And those little things I think are really important. I'd be intrigued to see that job description and maybe take that to my SLT. But I think it's that's what support looks like, right? I think from SLT as well. Yes, it is another person, but actually what they save in time, because that's our most valuable asset and biggest resource, is second to none, because then that can be deployed to actually think about your coaching sessions and your lessons a bit more, and your program and those conversations with staff, because they're equally important. So I suppose kind of moves on to really then that penultimate question in terms of your first year in or finishing your first year in the role. What valuable lessons or insights have you gained in terms of being a director of sport, and what would you pass on? Because as going from director of sport of essentially a senior school and stakeholder managing a director of sport in the junior school, to now overseeing 26 people in the department, what insights have you learned this year?
Yeah, I suppose a big one is no conversations necessarily a wasted conversation. You might come away from it and not have a hard, this is what I've picked up from this, or this is the next action to take from it. Sometimes those conversations that are 5 minutes in the morning can be really important moving forward, because it builds that trust and that relationship, and it's spending that time with your department, with other departments. I think sports departments can become quite insular, because we tend to move around very busily, doing lots of things. You tend to be in a sports hall or away from maybe the staff room,
the main building.
Yeah, so I've purposely tried to make sure I am, again, visible at break times, lunch times, where I can be, and have conversations with people who, again, maybe don't understand the role of a director of sport and might have that question for you. What do what is your role here? What do you do? And they're not being ignorant to it. It just, I don't think it has a clearly defined role, because it's so different in every school. Yeah. And you ask my wife, and I'm in charge of lost property and emails from parents, but hopefully she knows there's much more to it than that. And I think it's the education. You think because they're a teacher, they know what you're doing, but it's not quite the same. Oh, they're a head of department. It's not quite a head of department. It's not quite senior management.
Yeah.
It's somewhere in the middle, and it's so varied. There are days where you get an email about lost property. There are days you get an email from a parent that you have to act on within 5 minutes of getting it. So I think it's about using your time effectively, but also being willing to take the time to listen. And yeah, sometimes that means slightly later days, and sometimes it means you're putting stuff on hold that you wanted to get done, but it could be that key piece of information for that day or that week. And I think it gets your department and others really believing that you're there for them and with them, not to be in charge of them or to manage them. Yeah, that's part of it, but you want them to kind of want you there and want you making decisions. And then when you do make a hard decision, hopefully they'll say, well, yeah, let's get behind that, because it clearly hasn't been a spare of the moment thing. He will have thought this through, and I can go and ask him. If I've got a different opinion, I can knock on his door and actually talk it through with him, and he's not going to just dismiss me and say no.
And do you have that? Do you have where you've made those decisions and you've listened and actually gone, yeah, you might be right here. Actually, I'll change this, or actually this is the decision we've made, and these are the reasons why. Yeah,
I think you get that both ways, and I think it's sometimes being willing to say, actually, no, you're absolutely right. I've not thought it through in the same way you have, because I'm coming at it from a different perspective. Or some people have come and said, have you actually asked the kids? And you think, oh, actually, I'm making decisions for people that, while I think it's a good idea, have I actually gone to those that it's going to affect? So again, something we're looking to put in place is a bit of a student council. And again, not to have another meeting for meeting's sake, but to gain some really vital feedback, hopefully, and them feel like they've got a genuine voice, and not just on the way back at a bus, oh, sir, can we start this club or that club? We'll bring it to the forum or bring it to the council, and we'll discuss it properly, as opposed to, oh, there's Mr. Stewart, I'll walk past him in the corridor and say, can we do volleyball next week?
Yeah.
Let's be bigger than that. Let's think it through in a bit more detail than that.
Yeah. And I think that's, I think, where lots of schools, rightly so, are going to some extent, in terms of just bringing the pupils in, and just listening to them from both spectrums, those that are your performance teams, to those that are actually like, do you know what, can we just have a volleyball club? We've got some keen boys that want to do it at my place, and marked out volleyball nets, and they've cracked on, and that's been senior games, and we can trust them to get on with that, and they're invested in that. One thing that we spoke about in the department was having a women's Wednesday gym session, where actually it becomes a psychologically safe place and for the girls, because I know, probably like your gym becomes oversubscribed, and actually, how do we allocate the resources fairly and equitably? That's been a positive. Still work to do there, but that's come out of conversations with the girls from hockey fixtures and cricket fixtures, and that's been really positive on our end, definitely. What does year 2 look like? What does year 3 look like for you? What's some of the things you're looking to implement and move forward?
Yeah, so finished this year delivering a fairly big piece of work, which was observing a lot of this year, and then taking a sports strategy. I say sport in, again, that loosest term of sport, health, exercise, fitness. Even the title now of Director of Sport, Health and Fitness, should it be Director of, and again, you could go on forever, but it should it be Sport, Health, Fitness and Wellbeing, because we know how closely they are linked now, and more research is coming out to actually back that up. And it's not just that anecdotal, moving your body will make you feel better. And there is now evidence there that it's great, because you can give that to parents, and you're not just, they expect us to say it, but when it's coming out and it's real research, and again, even your SMT being able to put something like that in front of them. And I do that quite regularly. If I find a really interesting article, but they might read the headline of it, but dropping it to SMT and
nice. And a strategy to manage up, essentially.
Dropping it in text messages to them or WhatsApps to them, because they're happy with that being. It doesn't have to be a formal email, and it doesn't have to be War and Peace. It can be, find this really interesting. If you've got 2 minutes, and sometimes you get a really interesting reply, sometimes I'm sure it drops quite far down because they've got lots of other things on. But knowing that you're able to do that, I think, again, really, really key. And then going back to what you said about sort of the girls' side, one of the first things I did was in term 2, I moved on to the netball, and netball wasn't necessarily, or isn't, my sport. But the girls, knowing that I wasn't just going to move around boys' sports because that's kind of what I've done, meant that I was able to have those bus conversations with girls that I probably wouldn't have touched base with in term 1 because I was on that rugby side. And then again in cricket term or summer term where we did cricket, I actually stuck with the girls side of things a bit more. And Saturdays I tried to bob around and see a lot more of the boys and girls. And that again was just really useful because it gave the girls insight to, he's here for everyone, or hopefully that's what they think. I'm here for everyone, and I can go and knock at his door. So we had, an under 15 girl came and said, we're not happy with the number of fixtures we've got. Last year we had this year we had less, and they did, when I look back. And I don't think it was anyone's fault, it just was how it had happened. But within a day we'd managed to find them 3 more fixtures, and that was a really quick win. You asked, we did, and they went away super positive. That night get an email from parents saying she's come home absolutely buzzing, she's had a conversation with you at 8:30 in the morning, and by 4 o'clock you've been able to email and say, we've done this, now you hold up your end of the bargain and make sure that we're there, and we're trying to really engage with it. And they absolutely did. So wins like that, as you know, sometimes you need those, don't you? You need to get wins, because sometimes you can feel like you're drowning in bigger picture things, and sometimes those little wins, and take them and make sure you celebrate them, because they're really important to keeping you going. And then when you do get those big wins, they're probably more obvious to people, but sometimes you can go home and be so much happier with those little ones because it's made a real impact on a set number of pupils or a big number of pupils.
Yeah, definitely. It's hard to encourage, easy to criticize, and I think one thing I've learned from my wife is she keeps a thank you email folder. So any good stuff she gets, she pops it in there. And I think as any practitioner, we should have them, so you can delve into the archives when you're having one of those days and you just think, I'm getting it from both angles here, from above, below, kids, students, staff, dip into what you're doing well, and actually it can really bring you back to what it is your department vision is as well. And actually, for us, it's about enhancing the sporting and physical ambitions of our students. And your vision drives your decision, and I think that's important. And I think you mentioned it about actually what we're doing, is that going to translate into a positive experience, and they're still active and moving when they leave here, and that vision has to drive decision making within reason, I suppose. Resources aren't infinite, but
and the other thing would be reach out to other people. Like you and I met properly, was it last sort of summer term last year? We've kept in contact, and now we're doing this, and we've shared a few emails, a few texts and things. I talk to Danny Mugridge fairly regularly, who runs some of the independent coach education forums. I've helped her with some of those. And again, it just gives you another perspective. And sometimes it's just another ear who knows what you're going through, but can give you a different opinion. And they're not invested in your department, but they can hopefully, hear what you're saying and give you some sort of valuable feedback. Sometimes it's just somebody to listen.
Yeah, it's critical friend. I think that's what's important in this role, and people thinking of going into this role, and being able to actually just look at it from a different, an outside perspective. I think that's super important. That we've nearly been an hour. I don't want to take any more of your time, especially after a long week of coaching. Doing camps, and this is another area of many directors of sports. It doesn't just stop with the term time. For some directors of sports, and I'd be really interested to hear if any directors of sports do have to oversee an external summer camp or sports camp program, because while we're working in independent schools, it's also a very good opportunity to generate more income, utilize the facilities for the community, but who oversees that as well. And I think that's an area where, as we move forward, and with the VAT potentially coming onto fees, where the independent schools sit, are they for profit? Are they really focusing on those, or actually is it about doing a great job and that will take care of itself?
Yeah, no, I think I've certainly seen that in more and more roles that you see advertised, that, and even within departments, that it becomes part of your role that X number of weeks of your holidays should be or are allocated to those camps and things. And a lot of the people doing the camp I'm on are from the PE department or the sports department, and they're doing it because they want to. There's no remit for us to do it. But there are certainly some schools where it is part of your job. Again, if you like it and you love it, fantastic. But again, you talked about it last week. It's that striking that balance of, when do you have a break? When do you genuinely shut down and go away from things so you can come back refreshed and not feel like you're constantly slogging away at things? So I had the first 3 weeks sort of completely away from things. I've done this camp. Like I said to you, it's lovely because I'm a group leader but not in charge of things, and that's been really refreshing to come back and kind of go, right, we've got 5 sessions today. What do we want to do within those 5 sessions? Some of them are planned for us in terms of when our swim is, or they bring in an activity. But yeah, it is absolutely vital people get that break and move away from things. And you can sort of create a monster in your own head if you constantly think, how can I make things better? Sometimes pick up that book and read it, meet some friends you haven't met, go on holiday and give some time back to family, friends, whatever it is that helps you switch off.
Yeah, definitely. Well, look, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your holiday when it comes. And
yeah, no,
your
thank
summer
you,
holidays.
and thanks for having me on. It's been great to chat, and hopefully I look forward to listening to lots more of them.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.